I got into Neurosis around 2001. I was about 19 years old. They were one of the many bands I discovered from one of those Relapse Records Contamination. I think it was like Contamination 2.0 or something like that. Those compilations. Uh, it was a two-disc compilation. I think there were like 40 songs on there. So I discovered a lot of bands, but I didn't actually pursue all of them. I really only pursued a few: to see Suffocation, Mortician, Nile, and Neurosis. Uh, Neurosis, they don't really consider themselves a metal band, and I guess they really aren't. But man, are they heavy? One of the heaviest bands on the planet, if you ask me. And Enemy of the Sun is by far my favorite album of theirs, though some of the others come close. Through Silver and Blood, amazing. But something about an Enemy of the Sun, maybe it's because I heard it first, I don't know. It's just so goddamn crushing, and I don't know what it is. I find it oddly, I don't want to say catchy, but to me, I just find it so memorable. And Neurosis are one of those bands that their use of musical crescendos are untouchable. No other band I've ever heard in my life is able to build tension and then release it the way that Neurosis can do. It's some kind of magical secret that they have because, again, I've never heard another band that can do it quite the way that they do. The music is in its own way emotional, deep. It's just soul crushing. I've never gotten to see them live, but I've heard they're awesome live. I've literally heard people say their live shows are like religious experiences. Never had a religious experience, but it sounds intense. So, anyways, Neurosis, definitely my number six. They hold a special place in my heart. Amazing. I got into High on Fire through this album, and yeah, you guessed it. That's why it's my favorite, and that's why it's always been my favorite, and that's why it probably always will be my favorite, though I like what came before it and a lot of what came after it, too. So I heard this album, I think a year or maybe even two after it came out. I probably heard this in 2003, I'm guessing, if I remember correctly. Uh, Again, I think I might have heard High on Fire from a Relapse Records sampler. I think. I can't remember exactly. But what I do remember is hearing this album and these first few songs, and I've always loved bands like Motorhead and Slayer, and yeah, of course Black Sabbath, all bands that you hear in High on Fire's music. And this album is just, it literally to me does just sound like the soundtrack to like a barbarian raid party. I don't know what that is or what that means, but this is just like heavy metal made for and by barbarians. That's every time I listen to this album, that's just what I get. Maybe it's Matt Pike's gruff vocals, the tribal drumming from Des Kenzel. Um, this album is just perfect. I think it's highly underrated. I'm sure it has many fans, but it's not exactly something I hear about all the time. And I think I should specifically hear about this album more. To me, this is easily High on Fire's finest hour. I got into Crowbar probably around 2002 or 3. Uh, and you guessed it, Oddfellows Rest. Yeah, it was the first album of theirs that I heard. Ever since then, it's really kind of been all that I need. I have gone back, heard some of their early stuff. It's really good. I've heard a little bit of their later stuff. It's pretty good. But this one for me is just their finest hour, crowning achievement, whatever you want to call it. And I will say that song, the snippet that I played, is kind of misleading. It's probably my favorite song on the album. It's the title track. Uh, it's very cool and mellow, kind of Planet Caravan-ish. The rest of the album is much more heavy and brutal. But don't get me wrong, there is Crowbar are not a one trick pony. They're not just a heavy, brutal, gruff, you know, metal band. There's lots of introspective moments and a lot of emotion, genuine emotion that I really like. So I don't think I'll ever like another Crowbar album nearly as much as Oddfellows Rest. And a little bit of cool piece of history that I learned about the name of the album, Oddfellows Rest. So there is a graveyard in Louisiana. I think it's in New Orleans. That's where these guys are from. And there is a very old, like from the early 1900s, what they would call a shallow grave, which was where they would bury, poor people, because fuck, those are the less fortunate, right? People that couldn't afford a proper burial and a funeral or whatever, couldn't afford a casket, they would just basically dump their body in the dirt and just cover them with dirt, and it would only be like a foot or two underground. So if you walked, on really rainy days, you could walk past that graveyard and you could actually see bones sticking up out of the dirt. So Oddfellows Rest, was a term for poor people, I guess. But yeah, man, interesting story. I thought. Hope you enjoyed it. And if you've never heard Crowbar, please check this album out. If you're interested in doom and sludge metal and stuff like that, I think you might really find a lot to like here. And definitely start here, and then maybe work your way back. Check their early stuff out, and then after that, if you need more, go for the later stuff. But this album here is just a total fucking gem. So I'm a giant Candlemass fan. I mean, who the fuck isn't, right? But this might shock you. Maybe it won't. I don't know. I still to this day find it weird. But King of the Grey Islands was actually the first full length album from Candlemass that I would hear. I know. I was aware of the band. I don't know, a couple years prior, I'd heard, I remember downloading kind of various songs from the Messiah Marcolin era, and I loved it. So I kind of had just become a fan right in time for this album to come out. So of course, I was super excited. It was the first album to come out as since I'd been a fan. So I rushed to the store, picked up my copy, loved it, loved every second of it. I still do. I think this is one of the best non-classic albums, I guess you could say. I'll just say non Messiah Marcolin albums. This is one of the best. It's definitely the best of the Robert Lowe era, which I'm a fan of. I think Robert Lowe did great in this band. I think all the albums with him on vocals were awesome. I just think this one's the best. I got into Paradise Lost in the early 2000s through this album right here, Gothic. And surprise, not a surprise at all, I guess. It's always been my favorite. I don't think it's ever going to change. And how I found this album was reading interview with Danny Filth of Cradle of Filth, of course, in some metal magazine. I think it was Metal Maniacs, and he was talking about the albums that influenced him early on. And that's how I discovered Apsu and Paradise Lost. He was talking about how Gothic was, to him, it was kind of like just like Candlemass with death metal vocals, and I mean he's pretty much right. This is just a strikingly beautiful album. It's just hauntingly majestic. It's doom death metal at its finest. I'm glad to have some doom death on here because obviously there's not much. I think there might be another one on the one of the other videos, part 2 or 3. But yeah, this album right here is just timeless. I never get tired of it. It's an amazing classic. You can call it a doom metal album or a death metal album or a doom death or whatever. It's just a classic piece of metal.